In terms of showing you the future of AI, I can show you the 70% that no one else does.
Everything you think you know about AI might be wrong. In this exclusive call from inside my community, Matthew Griffin, the guy who advises the people running the world, revealed some interesting insights I did not see coming. From surprising AGI timelines to the kind of shifts that could upend society by 2040. This is a video you're going to want to watch all the way through. You won't hear these insights anywhere else.
Cheers, Barnabas. So my name is Matthew Griffin. I'm the CEO and founder of the 311 Institute. I track over 600 emerging technologies, over 400 mega trends. I work with royal households. I work with the G7, G20, G20, and then G77 governments. I've worked with a variety of different world leaders. I track over 600 emerging technologies, over 400 mega trends. I work with royal households. I work with the G7, G20, G77 governments. I've worked with a variety of different world leaders. I was over in Davos having conversations about the future of misinformation and truth. So you can see that on the YouTube channel. I work with the vast majority of sort of Fortune 100 organizations. So typically mid-cap and mega-cap organizations. The companies that you've got on you right now, so companies like Google and Microsoft, organizations like Pepsi and Coca-Cola, organizations like Arm, Samsung, Huawei. I work with companies like MasterCard and Visa. I work with your banks. I work with the UK government. I did a session with the UK government about 1.5 weeks ago now on the future of society. So that's always a very worthwhile video watching if you want to freak yourself out. And see what's arriving, etc., etc. So I lecture for Carnegie Mellon and Michigan University, as well as UCL and Greenwich University on artificial intelligence and other things. In terms of showing you say, the future of AI, I can show you the 70% that no one else does. We actually start off with a quick roundup of where we are with artificial intelligence just generally, and then where we're actually headed. So how many of you have used ChatGPT? Yeah, see, everyone. Doesn't matter where you are on the planet. You can be in China and they go, yeah, we use ChatGPT. So ChatGPT has a verbal IQ of 155, putting it in the top 0.1% of humans. It has 1,000 times more general knowledge than any human, and that was in 2023. When we have a look forward to artificial general intelligence, which we generally think arrives around 2026 to 2028. So Dario, who is the CEO of Anthropic, who I was with in Davos, says that really by 2026, 2027, we should all have access to a data center full of geniuses. Now, when we have a look at Sam Altman's version of the future, he terms artificial general intelligence.
By the way, this conversation happened within our private AI community, AI Creator Tools. There's a link in the pinned comment below this video and in the description. If you'd like to get access to exclusive industry guests like this, make sure to join so you can level up your AI game to create, learn, and grow with AI tools. Now let's get back to the interview.
As the point in time where AI outperforms all humans at all economically valuable work. So that fundamentally changes everything from how we access knowledge, how we access skills, how we work. I mean, if you have a look at the future of content creation, then we're already at the point in time where we see the cost, resources, and time involved in using AI to create content is falling to zero. But when we look at AGI, we believe that AGI, which will typically be around a 20 trillion parameter model, will have an IQ of 1,600 and 1 billion times more general knowledge than any human. And then as we start moving out to 2040, 2055, when we have a look at artificial superintelligence, bearing in mind that AIs today are already learning 300 million times faster than any human, we believe that ASI should have an IQ of about 1.6 million, and we don't know any of the other parameters. But frankly, add lots of different zeros, basically to lots of different things. And really in the next 20-ish years, the amount of societal change that will be wrought on us through or via developments in artificial intelligence will be extreme. So, and that's before we talk about quantum artificial intelligence and liquid artificial intelligences, which we've already developed. This particular presentation was one that I gave in front of Paramount, the BBC, Warner Brothers, and a bunch of other sort of, shall we say, execs in London, basically something called the Royal Television Society, which is a place where anyone who's interested in media is able to go basically to understand the latest trends and developments in whatever they care about. Now, when we have a look at development of synthetic content, I've been looking at generative artificial intelligence for the past 10 years, and we'll sort of break into that in a bit. So, here we go. Now, when we have a look at generative artificial intelligence, generative AI basically is not a flash in the pan. Generative AI originally started being developed really about 20 years ago, but it really started coming to prominence about 10 years ago. Now, over in Hollywood, I've worked with a variety of different directors, including James Cameron and Chris Nolan. We are now developing an artificial intelligence content creation, shall we say, media company. Now, when we have a look at the development of AI, if you move back far enough, basically this stuff was rubbish. However, recently, a studio mogul was going to invest $800 million in a traditional studio, like we see with Shepperton and so on and so forth, and decided, because of the advances that he'd seen in artificial intelligence, that he would actually can the entire project. So what we have here is we have the increasing ability for anybody of any skill level with no money, no time, no resources, and no level of expertise whatsoever, being able to create a variety of different, shall we say, synthetic content or fake content that can then be pushed out. Now, traditionally, the way that the future works is you will see developments in different parts of an ecosystem. And over time, all of these different parts start coming together. So whereas this content that I created here, I had to create a piece of content in this platform, combine it with this platform, combine it with this platform, in time, everything gets aggregated. Now, when we have a look at generative content, it isn't just media, basically, that we're actually using for synthetic content. We are now starting to use generative artificial intelligence to develop new drugs. So, for example, we've now developed with a company called In Silico 30,000 new drugs in 21 days. Now, if you wanted to create a new kind of medical drug, it would, especially a class A drug, it would typically cost you about $1 to $3 billion. It would take you typically about 10 years to actually do that. The 7 class A drugs that we recently used AI to develop within Silico were developed for $300,000 for all 7 of them, and we did that in 2 days. We've also seen generative artificial intelligence being used by Under Armour to develop new trainers. So the AI will develop the product, develop in this case the trainer, and then the trainer can be 3D printed. So in Under Armour's case, using Gen AI, we've managed to reduce the time that it takes to create a product and get it to the market by 98%. So not only is artificial intelligence accelerating the rate of our being able to do things like improving productivity and so on and so forth, it's actually improving exponentially the rate of software development, but also hardware development. And then over in Germany, we used an artificial intelligence called Hyperganic to develop a completely new class of rocket engine in 6 hours. So when we actually have a look at the power of artificial intelligence overall, it's not just being used to create content any longer. Now, when we have a look at retrospectives, so this particular, actually, if you scan that QR code, then this will take you to a keynote that I gave in 2017, which showed off the first generative AI images. So when we have a look at the first images generated by generative AI. So these were GANs, essentially. So generative artificial intelligence networks. These were made by Stanford. Back in 2016, 2017, what you would do is you would type the kind of video that you wanted the AI to produce, and the AIs would produce these kinds of videos. And you can see that in the middle, the top middle over here, that's like a golfer. You kind of got, so you got someone that looks like a swimmer down here. This was shown to over 120 banking CEOs. And on the one hand, they were amazed that AI was able to create synthetic video. But again, when you're having a look at these kinds of technologies back in 2016, 2017, you think a number of things. You think that's junk. It costs about $3 million to create these. So you think it's expensive. Because it's junk and expensive, you think no one will actually use it. And because you don't think anyone will use it, you don't think it's going to really make an impact on the world or change anything. And we all know where we are now, basically, with platforms like Sora. We are now at the point where we're creating relatively high definition video content that is full 1080p or bigger, that makes these things basically literally look like the cavemen and girls they are. Now, when we have a look at the near future, if you want to, should we say, manipulate society for better or worse, if you want to change things, then you only really need to control two things. If you can control pixels and sound, so if you can control where the pixels are placed on a screen, the color of those pixels, how they go together, if you can control the sound, basically, that comes through someone's speakers, then you can manipulate society at huge scale. So increasingly, even though governments have taken about 5 years to cotton on, when we have a look at deepfakes, misinformation, disinformation, when we have a look at the trajectory of synthetic content and synthetic media and its impact on society, let alone its impact on human creativity and all sorts of other things, suffice to say, anything that is behind the screen, increasingly we can manipulate it and or generate it for free. Now, again, stepping back kind of 10 years ago, I said to people that artificial intelligence one day will be creative. Now, when we have a look at things like the future of work, when we have a look at the future of education and skills, we're always taught as humans that AI will never be creative, because being creative is a uniquely human trait. It's a right brain trait. However, AI can be creative. And the way that AI can be creative is if you understand a process flow, then you can turn that process flow into an AI algorithm. You can put those steps together and you can create an AI model. So, for example, if I said to you, from an innovation perspective, make this half the weight, you would know that you could probably cut it in half. You know that you could probably make it out of thinner materials or whatever it happens to be. So when we talk about human creativity, whether it's the latest fashions, the latest movies, whether it is the latest products, creativity is a process. Innovation is a process, which is why you can buy books on innovation and how to do it. So over in the US, basically Stanford ran a variety of blind experiments. And these were essay writing competitions using the large language models. And when they marked the science fiction writings at the end of the experiment, they found that artificial intelligence was in the top 1% of creatives. So anyone that tells you that AI cannot be creative needs to have a brain check. In addition to that, when we're asking artificial intelligence to create, for example, the latest blockbuster movie or the latest Lexus advert, the first thing that AI does is it has to understand the brief. So that is AI understanding human natural language well enough to understand what you're asking it to do. Secondly, when we have a look at things like the Lexus adverts that AI is producing, it will go and have a look at all of the award-winning, all of the best car adverts. And it will figure out what makes a good car advert. And it's things like, the right emotion, music with the right tempo, the right color grading, and so on and so forth. So AI is increasingly able to create not just creative content, but good content, because like a human, it is going and assessing and evaluating what makes content good, and then trying to mimic that and replicate that. Now, when we actually have a look at the end game of where we are headed to, ultimately, the cost of creating a Hollywood blockbuster movie will drop to zero. Ultimately, the resources that you need to make a blockbuster movie or an advert or a short clip, whatever it happens to be, will drop to zero. And ultimately, the amount of time that it takes you to create a Hollywood movie will also drop to zero because it's just compute. So over time, and this will start really emerging, and this is emerging now, but realistically, it starts accelerating in the next 5 years. Everybody that has an internet connection and a $20 a month subscription to something like OpenAI's Sora model will increasingly be able to get AI to put together any kind of content that you want them to put together, whether that's reports, whether that is images, whether that is video, whether that is even virtual reality assets and virtual reality worlds. Because increasingly, I just simply say to a game engine like Unity, create a virtual reality world, and off it goes. So what happens to the future of human creativity and creatives like musicians, producers, cameramen, Foley experts, when everybody on the planet is able to create high quality, authentic content? Now, additionally, when we actually have a look at the speed of creation already, the James Bond movies, so the James Bond franchise, which, it's been running since the 60s, so sort of 65. The James Bond franchise took, 50 years, basically, to get to 24 movies. Using artificial intelligence, labs like Pixar, the James Cameron labs, and so on and so forth, created 22 Marvel movies in about 10 years. So bearing in mind that movies are a very, very different kind of content to a short form video on TikTok or Insta or whatever it happens to be. So we can quite easily see that the speed of movie creation, which is the hardest form of content creation really, is accelerating phenomenally. Now, in addition to that, when we talk about democratizing the development of content, 2 years ago, my 10-year-old son wrote this using AI. So what happens to the future of human potential when a 10-year-old can write a book, sell a book, make £50,000 from it, and get a publishing deal with Adidas? So this was done using some of the earliest AIs. And as you can see, some of the content, every single image in this book is AI generated, and that was 2 years ago. So what happens when kids get to the point where they can create a hit blockbuster movie? The kids get rich. Increasingly, when we actually have a look at everybody's ability to create content for next to nothing, the thing that becomes the moat is distribution. So everybody increasingly needs to turn themselves into a brand. because one of my clients is Paramount. So if you think about Paramount, what happens to Paramount when I simply push a big red button to spit out a Halo-like franchise? If my Halo franchise is as good as Paramount's Halo franchise, then who wins? It's the people typically who have distribution. Because like Mr. Beast, for example, I create a piece of content, and if I have 400 million subscribers, then it's more than likely that my Halo franchise will be the one that succeeds, and it's not going to be Paramount's. So distribution, having access to a large number of followers, communities, etc., actually becomes the business differentiator in this world. Now, when we actually have a look at kind of where we are, at the moment, we went from humans producing content with our bare hands and our bare brains. Then we started using tools, and those were relatively dumb tools like Premiere and so on and so forth. Then we started introducing artificial intelligence basically into these tool sets, where now AI is automating some of the work. However, ultimately, we move from AIs that automate our work for us in content creation. So, for example, I say to AI, create a blockbuster Marvel-like video, and it goes off and does it, to a point in time where we see autonomous artificial intelligences simply producing their own content. Now, when we have a look at where we are across this scale, and actually this comes out of my book. So I wrote a book on synthetic content 6 years ago now, again, before ChatGPT and Sora and all these other things came out. So that's actually available on the website. So I can give Barnabas the link to that. That's a freebie. When we have a look at audio, at the moment, AI basically is increasingly sort of creating, helping us create music. But once AI has created a piece of music, it's very difficult to tweak it. So it'll create, for example, a piece of rap music. But if I want to change the tone of something, if I want to change a single word, if I want to change the lyrics, the feel of it, then it's very difficult to tweak the content that we've created. This is the next generation of synthetic media. We go from using AI to create, for example, a short form video, to then being able to use AI and new tool sets to change the things that we don't like. We see this with Midjourney, for example, where it will produce an image, and if we don't like part of the image, we can select that part of the image and then get it to change it. So when we have a look at the synthetic content ecosystem, it's still really quite juvenile. When we have a look at characters, because again, we can create characters in a variety of different ways. So there's a difference between deepfakes and synthetic media. But a deepfake is the use of artificial intelligence to manipulate a piece of content, generally of people, that already exists. Synthetic media is where AI creates, for example, that character, whether that's in 2D, 3D, whether it's dynamic, whether it's static, from a blank sheet of paper. So it's brand new content. Now, in addition to that, while we talk about artificial intelligence actually generating new worlds, new characters, and everything else, increasingly we're embedding artificial intelligence within things like the Unity gaming engine. So there is this. There are two ways that we can start creating, should we say, worlds, where worlds are the worlds that you might see in a movie. I'll keep going back to movies. So you can either get AI just to generate that world from scratch, just as a 2D representation, movie-like, or we can use artificial intelligence to generate that world in a Unity engine that we can then start zooming through everything else. So AI is creating all sorts of different characters. I showed you a digital character, Brian, earlier. Imagery as well, text, VFX. When we have a look at the use of artificial intelligence to generate VFX, there are not many companies actually doing this, but we've got companies like InterDigital and MPC doing this. So MPC were the guys behind Blade Runner 2049. So if you ever want to see the cutting edge of AI VFX, then MPC is a really good studio to go to. But then, of course, we're also creating AI video, which, that's now commonplace. Also, we're using artificial intelligence to create virtual reality worlds as well. So eventually, when we have a look at AI being able to autonomously generate new images, new content, and everything else, we're still in the first 30 meters of a 100-meter race. Now, this is the traditional movie workflow. So if you're making a professional movie, then this is the movie workflow. Around 30% of the full movie workflow is now automated. So, for example, when we actually have a look at AI's ability to understand a brief, that's increasingly good. So AI basically can increasingly write scripts. It can do the planning. It can figure out the composition that we want for the movie. It can start doing the shooting, so it can figure out shooting angles and everything else, whether that's in a virtual reality world, which when we have a look at things like The Lion King from Disney, that was actually all videoed in a virtual reality world. That's it. So that's something to check out. So what we have, when we have a look at pre-production, increasingly the movie workflow is seeing signs of automation, but, we're still relatively young. Most of the automation that's actually happening in the Hollywood studios is taking place in the editing area. So we've got audio, basically where increasingly we're using AI to clean the audio, dub the audio, do EQ and mixing, or either on auto or autonomously, Foley, syncing and everything else. When we have a look at graphics, so again, this is the use of artificial intelligence to create everything from sort of After Effects, lower thirds, all the way through basically to specific animations. So we're seeing AI increasingly being used in Japan, for example, to develop manga cartoons. When we have a look at VFX, increasingly AI is doing really, really well in helping us automate rotoscoping. So rotoscoping used to be a very, very laborious, tedious, and expensive process, and increasingly you just push a button, you rotoscope away. But also when we actually have a look at things like color grading, so we can kind of see that on the pre-production side, AI is having an impact, but it's lagging when compared to editing and pre-production. So AI is very, very close to fully automating color grading and everything that goes along with that. When we have a look at finishing, again, we're just using AI to make minor edits, minor tweaks. So if you use the Adobe Creative Suite, then increasingly you just simply say to Adobe Premiere, finish this off for me, and it will figure out what you're trying to do. It will bring in the B-roll. It will edit the clip and say, there you go, there's a finished clip. AI still can't master movies. Deliverables, we can do streaming. So we're developing new adaptive AI codecs to help us stream 8K across very low bandwidth networks, and so on and so forth. So this is the full movie workflow. And then when we actually have a look at the impact of artificial intelligence and the ability to create content, not always media, using AI, the impacts are vast. So I won't go through all of these, but as you can see here, on the one hand, this up here is high impact. So number 4 is reaching high impact and maturity as well up here. So the higher the impact and the more mature something is, the more likely it is that we're going to start seeing job displacement in those roles. So when we have a look at 4, conversational interfaces, generative AI is being used to create conversational interfaces right now. So this year, you should start seeing the point in time where you can actually have a proper chat with AI. So if you want to talk to AI at the moment, it generally gets what you told it or what you asked it quite quickly. So this year, we're going to see something called the infinite context window, which means that you can have a proper full-on chat with artificial intelligence today. And then next month, you can come back to it and it will remember the conversation that we had today. So blogging, we've seen a huge amount of displacement in the blogging sphere as well already. So we're seeing a lot of junk websites now. Book writing, increasingly scientific journals basically are increasingly being written by AI. So Nature and Springer have now had to ban the use of AI in scientific writing because it was just getting out of control. When we have a look at things like customer service agents, one of the jobs that is increasingly automated is customer service, because AI is able to understand your tone, your intonation, what you're talking about, and it's able to respond in natural human language. Something that we're doing basically with the UK schools is increasingly we're using these generative artificial intelligence and synthetic voice AIs to help students debate anyone from Einstein all the way through to Donald Trump. So one of the projects I'm involved with is a virtual reality school. And we have students, we've got about 400 students go into a virtual reality, and they will debate anyone they want on any topic they want. Gaming, when we have a look at gaming, increasingly today, the vast majority of games and images, et cetera, use GPUs to render. But with Microsoft and with Google, we can now use artificial intelligence to render games frame by frame as individuals are walking through that game. So these sort of generative games are now leading to a new kind of computing platform that Jensen Huang, basically the CEO of NVIDIA, is calling generative computing. So at the moment, rendering is generally done in a hyperscale data center somewhere. It'll increasingly be at the edge, but GPUs are going to change. We can use it for movie generation, music, personal assistants. You're going to see a lot more personal assistants coming through this year. This is kind of termed agentic artificial intelligence. Procedural content generation. If you think about the video here, increasingly the end game for content generation is we have AI make a movie, for example. AI then uses a mixture of sensors to figure out how engaged I am as an individual with that movie. So, for example, if I'm sitting there like that, then I'm probably a bit bored. In which case, AI, through the camera, using biometrics and biomarkers, will be because you can even tell someone's blood pressure and their heart rate through their face. If AI is showing you a movie and it thinks that you're losing interest in that movie, then it can just start producing a brand new movie on the fly. So at the moment, if you go and watch, say, Captain America in the movies or in the cinemas, all of us will see exactly the same movie. In the future, if you're sitting at home watching Captain America and you're getting a bit bored or you're getting a bit excited about something, the AI can understand that, it can see that, and it can change the movie that you're watching on the fly. And so you end up seeing a unique piece of content that no one else has actually watched. We're also seeing report writing, synthetic celebrities. So Tom Hanks, a little while ago, but he actually was one of the first actors to sign away the rights to his likeness, so that when he dies, the Hollywood studios can bring him back to life as a digital avatar. So increasingly, when we have a look at Hollywood actors, they are now starting to change basically the actors' contracts to include the ability to use famous actors' likenesses when they're dead. We've also got the rise of synthetic influencers. So when you have a look at, when you go and ask any kids in Europe or in the US what job they want in the future, the answer they generally get is, I want to be a YouTuber. I want to be an influencer, right? However, if I'm able to create an authentic digital human that is able to do everything that a real human influencer can do, why do I actually need a human influencer? So we've seen virtual influencers like Phil Michaela, and there are now quite a lot of these, who is now a millionaire. So I just simply create a virtual influencer as a digital human. I put them into different situations. Brands can sponsor them, and you can change these virtual influencers in any way that you like. If I can just push a button, create a Mr. Beast-like YouTube video, then what happens to the kid who wanted to be Mr. Beast? They end up getting automated. So this changes everything. So increasingly, kids are being lined up for a future as influencers and content creators, which as jobs could very well dead end completely within 10 to 15 years. Even before that, but you need to, if you really want to make it easy, then 10 to 15 years time, everyone's making blockbuster movies, everyone's making a Mr. Beast video. Then we've got teaching and training. So we're using AI basically to create new training courses. We see this throughout universities in the UK as well as schools. And of course, TV series generation. If I can make a Halo series just by clicking my fingers, then I'm a producer. I am the new Paramount. Now, however, if you want to use artificial intelligence to create a short form video, let alone a movie, then it needs to know a lot of stuff. So if you take this is a scene from Blade Runner 2049. If I wanted AI to produce a scene like this out of Blade Runner 2049, then it needs to know that when this building blows up, that there are flames and smoke that go upwards, that get pushed about by the wind. It needs to understand, if we're producing a car, it needs to understand what's the function of the car, what's the plot, what kind of vehicle would be in Blade Runner 2049, what kind of material basically should it be made of, where should it be in the scene? Should it be at the front of the scene, the back of the scene? If it's at the back of the scene, it needs to understand that these drums here need to be smaller. So it needs to understand perspective. It needs to understand the laws of nature and the laws of physics for flames. It needs to understand that if you blow up a building, you don't just end up with a load of marshmallows. When we have a look at the actor has got to be consistent. So that's one of the biggest problems that we've seen with some of the should we say, text to video generators, is it's not that they can't produce accurate characters, it's that they can't maintain the consistency of characters from one sort of video clip to another. So it needs to understand that who's the lead actor or actress? What clothes should they be wearing? How do those clothes move? How does the actor walk? What do they sound like? You know, if Ryan Gosling sounded like Marilyn Monroe, then that's going to spoil the movie. When we think about trees, it's got to think, well, what is a tree? So in order to get to the point where we are able to use AI to create even an authentic 5-second video clip of something like this, these AIs have to be experts in a lot of different individual disciplines and domains. And that's been the biggest problem. You know, we will have AIs that understand the laws of nature, like the gaming engines. We will have an AI that understands materials. We will have AIs that are good at recreating Ryan Gosling's voice. We will have AIs that understand how to put together the right vehicle, but they've all been in separate companies, separate platforms. If I, as an individual, want to create a movie for myself, I don't want to have to flick between 20 or 30 different companies' products, edit everything, stitch everything together, and then ship that out. I just want to basically push a button. I just want to say, create a blockbuster movie, and the AI does it. And that's ultimately where we get to, because all of the companies behind this all end up starting to aggregate. You'll see this with Sora. So with OpenAI, we'll have Sora will be able to produce video. Then you'll see editing controls coming into it. Then you'll see consistency coming into it, and so on and so forth. And then you'll be able to either use your voice or text to change elements. You know, I want to change this to a Barbie car, you know, and the AI understands that I want to change this vehicle to something else, and it swaps it in. But it doesn't just swap it in here, it swaps it in across all frames. And then when we have a look at the future, so this is something that I did with Samsung. So with Samsung, I've been working on the year 2069, which is their centennial. Today, basically, we are excited about using artificial intelligence to create content, whatever that content is, whether it's a report, whether it's a movie, basically whether it's a virtual avatar, virtual influencer, or whatever it happens to be. But when we actually have a look at improvements in brain-machine interfaces, 3 years ago, we reached the point where we can actually stream your brain, so what you're thinking, what you're imagining, or even what you're seeing in your head, direct to a TV screen. So when we actually have a look at brain-machine interface technologies, years and years ago, this was the best. So in about 2016, I would have a skull cap on. I'd look at a geometric image like that one, and the AI would be reading. The AI would be reading billions of human neurons, and because these AIs had been trained on what we call fMRI machines, they understood that when the blood vessels in your brain dilated in such a way that when I looked at this image, the blood vessels in my brain would expand in a particular pattern. My neurons and synapses would fire in a particular pattern. And it would say, right, when I see this pattern of brain activity, this is the image that you're actually looking at. Right? So in 2016, I was showing off these BMI images. And again, you sort of look at it and go, okay, it's impressive, basically, because I can kind of see that that square looks a bit like a square. However, 2022, I now basically look at this image on the left, on my left. So I look at this image. God blimey, I've mirrored the camera the wrong way. So I looked at this image, and you can see the reconstruction. So within the space of, what's that, 6 years, we went from brain-machine interfaces that can read your mind and produce quite a horrible-looking representation to developing brain-machine interfaces that can create high-definition images. So Mark Zuckerberg, funny story, a little while ago hired Regina Duggan. Now, Regina Duggan is the Director General of DARPA, which is the bleeding-edge military research arm of the US Army. And Mark Zuckerberg has been working on non-invasive brain-machine interface technologies because he wants to turn Facebook into the world's first telepathic social network. Now, when you actually think about where Mark Zuckerberg would actually shove a brain-machine interface, it's going to be in the Oculus headsets. And then the future of the Oculus headsets isn't a headset, it's a set of glasses. So when you actually have a look at companies like HTC, when you have a look at companies like Huawei, increasingly now we are packing brain-machine interfaces into the size of a kid's decal sticker that you can just put on your neck, or into a pair of glasses, and so on and so forth. So over the next, these will mature. I mean, they're starting to come through now, but over the next 5 to 10 years, you will see the commercialization of brain-machine interface technology, which will only be slowed down when regulators get freaked out and wonder what the hell is happening, and just exactly, and start asking questions about how is Meta storing your brain information. And that was it from me. So there we go, a little trip into the future.
Wow, thank you. That was loaded.
Matthew, sorry, Rex here. Fantastic presentation. My question is, like, well, the first thing that comes to me is, aren't you scared of what's coming? Because clearly someone who's in front of the curve, you are on the pulse of it all. But, you know, brain recognition and all of that is like, what on earth? and the pace at which, you know, we are advancing.
Oh.
There must be a human element of this that scares you slightly.
Yeah, no, there is. So if we have a look at the speed of things, for example, you know, if you step back to, say, your grandfather's day, you know, when if you were talking to your grandfather about technology, you know, he might say, well, you know, I've got you know, I've seen these things coming through. They're called washing machines, you know, or TVs, you know, a big TV box. So I don't know what to think about that. But the time that it took to, I mean, you'll sort of seen these charts, you know, the time that it took for 50 million people to adopt the TV was like something like 70 years, you know, it was ages, you know. So in your grandfather's day, he would have seen a new technology emerging, but would have had like 10, 15 years to actually understand what that technology was, what it was useful for, what the impact of it could be, and then figure out what was he going to do. Was he going to embrace it? Was he going to reject it? What would he use it for? You know, so in the olden days, we all had more time to see something coming, think about what it was and the impacts of what it was, and then plan and adapt accordingly. Now with AI, I could be talking to you about the latest artificial intelligence developments that we see today as an individual or as a business. And I could say, this is what we see coming. And tomorrow that thing could be here. You know, we can still see it, but the amount of time that you have to understand it, gain a point of view on it, figure out, you know, is it an opportunity? Is it a threat? You know, and then what are you going to do about that? And plan is now not 10 to 15 years. It's now, I mean, depending on the kind of technologies, it can be instantaneous. So around the world, 75% of people are now anxious about the future. And sort of bringing it to, say, synthetic content. If I said to you, synthetic, you know, increasingly we have AIs basically that will help us create movies. If you're a movie director like James Cameron or Chris Nolan, and I know this because I literally speak to them, they're like, this stuff puts us out of work. Right? You know, you speak to Chris about this stuff, and he goes, look, you know, there is no doubt in my mind that as a film producer, you know, this stuff eventually makes me and the crew of 300 people with something like Oppenheimer completely redundant. Now, when we talk about, should we say, new technologies making people redundant, there's a mindset. Now, firstly, are you worried about being made redundant, or are you worried about losing your income? Because with most people, they're actually worried about losing the income. Okay. So with the UK government, we're actually splitting this into two. And I'll come to that in a minute. But if you think about AI, a good analogy that we have is AI is the tractor. Okay. We see artificial intelligence being able to automate or either fully automate or partially automate up to about 80% of jobs in different ways, even futurists. Just don't tell anyone I said that. Now, if we think of AI as the tractor, your mindset matters. Because if you go back to the time when the tractor was starting to enter the fields, you'd have people looking at the tractor, you'd have farmhands looking at the tractor thinking, bloody hell, that tractor is going to make me as a farmhand redundant. What the hell am I going to do? You know, and you try to go and find another job as a farmhand, right? But this is where mindset's important. What if you were the individual that looked at the tractor and didn't think, bloody hell, this is going to make me redundant. How am I going to live? What would happen if you were the kind of individual that looked at the tractor and you were the CEO of John Deere? So when we have a look at these different technologies, you know, and this is sort of where we face a huge societal shift, because if you were a human novelist, then I can say, I mean, I write all these books. AI is useless at writing these things. If you're a human novelist and I said, artificial intelligence will replace you, then you're worried about your income. Now, from my son's perspective, he doesn't know how to write a book, but he wrote a book. He made £50,000 off it. Now, from Caden's perspective, do you think Caden's there going, it's a real shame that we automated human book writers, human authors? I mean, so this is sort of the difficult thing. You know, ultimately, if you have a look at synthetic content creation, I mean, can you create a movie today? No. Okay. So it's a question, right? So as artificial intelligence automates different jobs, tasks, and skills, if I put a nice interface over the front of that, I democratize access to that skill for you. Okay? So you might be a rubbish author, but increasingly in the future with AI, you can be a best-selling author. You might be rubbish at creating art, but using AI, I give you access to the skill of art. You might not know how to do software development, but using AI, you can write an application. You can write code. You might not be a lawyer, but using AI, you can draft contracts and analyze contracts. So on the one hand, these technologies, from a human perspective, we look at these technologies and say, I'm very worried that AI is going to take my job, whatever that job is, lawyer, you know, data scientist at McLaren, etc. But the flip side is, what would you do as an individual if you only had access to three things? Today, you have access to all of the world's knowledge, not information, knowledge, because through the use of AI, you have access to a data center of geniuses. Increasingly, you have access to all the world's skills. You are not a software developer. You couldn't produce an Oppenheimer-like Chris Nolan movie, but in time, AI will let you. And then thirdly, the only marketplace that you have instant access to is 4 billion connected people. So if you knew how to execute, you can use AI to create your Chris Nolan movie. And if you know how to execute, you could potentially have that movie in front of 4 billion people by the end of the day. So when you actually think about the amount of power that you have as an individual, the potential that you have as an individual, you have never, ever, ever seen anything like it in human history. But school never taught you how to use that power. School teaches us how to play defense, how to go and work for a company. School never said to you at any point, the only things you have access to is all the world's knowledge, all the world's skills, and a global marketplace of 4 billion connected people. Now go and do something with that. Which therefore means that your potential as a human, increasingly in today's world and tomorrow's, is literally unlimited. Which is why I then come back to distribution is the moat. Because if I can create contracts, if I can create movies, if I can create art, if I can write books, etc. If everyone can do that, then what makes me more successful commercially than everyone else is I have 100 million followers. I have a community of 50 million people, whatever it happens to be. And this is sort of why when we have a look at online, increasingly the people who are billionaires are simply people with gigantic followings. Kim Kardashian, hello, I've just created. I mean, you imagine Kim Kardashian coming out basically with a new presentation mouse clicker. I mean, she'd make hundreds of millions off that. The network effect. But then, so taking it to another level, all of us are very worried, not necessarily about losing our jobs, we're worried about losing our income. So would you like a synthetic content story? Okay, right. In truth, this is a true story. In the United States, there was a man called Mr. Mankind. This is about 18 months ago. He was an artist based out of Seattle. And what he was doing is he was creating artwork, putting them onto his website. People would go to his website and then they'd buy his artwork and pictures. And that's how he made his living. As artificial intelligence got better at creating artwork, he found that no one was going to his website. AI, Mid-Journey in those days, had basically made him redundant, killed off his revenue stream, killed off his income. So he used ChatGPT. So he used ChatGPT to create Maincoin, which is like a cryptocurrency. So ChatGPT came up with the name of the cryptocurrency. It coded the cryptocurrency, created the business plan, created the marketing plan. I could never do the fourth finger. Created the marketing plan. And he pushed it live into Twitter. The cryptocurrency's name was Turbo Toad. 2 weeks later, Turbo Toad had a valuation on the decentralized Binance exchange in California of $250 million. Mr. Mankind used artificial intelligence to create a fortune for himself, which even today is worth $50 million. So when we talk about things like the future of work, what if I said to you, I tell you what, I'm going to make you redundant right now. Okay. Instantly you're going, bugger, fucking hell. What about my income? But what if I said, that's all right. I've managed to use AI to create a cryptocurrency, which is basically a form of money. And I managed to get AI to pump it to $250 million. You now have $250 million, 250 million greenbacks in the bank. Do you care that AI just made you redundant?
Absolutely not.
No, exactly. And now you are free to do what you want to do, which means that sort of ultimately, as artificial intelligence unlocks all this potential within us, the next question that I ask kids and adults, and pretty much no adult ever has an answer. If I said to you here, the only thing that you've got access to is all the world's knowledge, all the world's skills, and a global marketplace of X. what's your purpose? If I said to you, what would get you up out of bed every morning, time and time and time again? Ikigai, kind of that Japanese sort of methodology. What's your purpose? All of us go to school, we come out of school, we find a job, and whether or not we actually like that job becomes our life, that becomes our livelihoods, that becomes our income. So again, school, at what point did school ever say to you, what's your purpose? Yeah, they ask you what career you want. Yeah, what job would you want? They never say, what do you want to achieve? We are literally being taught how to find a job and work for people. We are generally never taught how to find our own purpose and build stuff using the tools that increasingly are science fiction like. When we look at the speed of things, yes, this change freaks me out, because even as a futurist, this stuff's coming fast and heavy. I mean, if we have a look at 2026, 2027, 2028, what happens when we do start realizing an artificial intelligence future where AI is able to outperform all humans at all economically valuable work? AI is now in the top 0.2% of software developers in terms of expertise and the work it produces. 66% of software developers are now worried that they're going to get replaced by AI. And yet, if you move back 10 years ago, when I was talking to people about AI replacing software developers would say, no, it's crazy. Software development's too difficult. If you know the process flow of a job, I can automate it. Goldman Sachs just automated the IPO process. It's a 160-step process. If you know the flow of something, the steps, I can automate it. You can automate anything. Which then comes back to, if nothing is really safe, what do you do for yourself and how do you build a moat? And increasingly, you are the moat.
You also mentioned, Rex asked earlier, you mentioned about liquid intelligences.
So when we have a look at the future of artificial intelligence itself, we all know AI as machine learning and neural networks today. Eventually, we move to quantum artificial intelligence. We've already developed DNA-based AI and biological AI. So the University of Manchester has got a DNA-based artificial intelligence that has been playing chess and Sudoku, because why not? Yeah. However, when we have a look at the liquid artificial intelligence was created at MIT using an ionic computer. So an ionic computer is basically a liquid computer device. And we managed to create a liquid neural network. We've also managed 3D print AIs called diffractive AIs, I'll put a link into the chat. There's even AIs that are developing AIs now. There's an AI that we can develop within Minecraft. That's a very fun, weird one. So here we go. Right. So if you go to this page, so this has got all my books on, and they're all free. So you've got a emerging technology codex. So if you want to have a look at all the latest artificial intelligence, I mean, I can make science fiction look tame. So if you want to go and have a look at the latest AIs and everything else, that's the emerging technology codex, which is kind of that job. So they're like the new one's like 450 pages long, and the technologies are all laid out like that. I've got the trends code, so you've got trends, so the codexes in there, that sort of thing. There's also, if you do want to build your own multi-billion-dollar company, then that's used by Samsung for a laugh. So that's literally an A to Z of how to go from zero to a fully launched multi-billion-dollar company. We've got the future of synthetic content, which I did for Disney. So that goes up to 2035. You can have a look at Caden's book as well. That's on there. So it's literally all on that link. But if you want to dig into over 300 of the latest emerging technologies, which are N+1, N+2, N+3, N+4, which go up to, there's one that goes up to 2,000 years out called Stellar Engines. That's a bonkers one. Then just look at that link. It tells you what the technologies are, what they're used for, states of development, who's developing what, and all that kind of bonkers stuff. But everything that you can think of as science fiction, I've got a video for it. Genuine holograms, brain streaming, proper tractor beams, bit of quantum teleportation at a very small level, naturally. Yeah, it's the world that you actually live in, or the world you think you live in, is not actually the world you live in.
Few questions that came to my mind, and if anyone else has questions, like just raise your hand or something. Yeah, like one is like, I would be interested to know like your story, like how briefly, like how did you get into being this futurist right now? How did you end up in this role? Did you plan it, or did you just find yourself in it? And then the other one is, you talked about making ourselves a brand, and then you also talked about AI influencers. So like, if you make an AI influencer, surely that could potentially just be copied by someone else. But even if you make yourself an AI brand, like how do you even stop someone else just copying you?
Yeah.
And make an AI version of you? Like how can you really like make a brand that is secure?
So it's a great question. Well, when you think about the future of work, increasingly you can actually clone and copy yourself, and you can create digital articles of yourself. Okay, so for example, I'm here. I could be charging you guys, say, £100 an hour to have a authentic conversation with the real Matt. However, everyone else on the planet could be talking to my digital avatar, and they might be chatting to me for £5 an hour or something like that. In terms of copying, there's nothing really stopping me from copying, for example, Tom Hanks's face and likeness and everything else. So I do a lot of work with law firms, so companies like DLA Piper, Allen and Overy, Dentons, those kinds of guys. And over the past sort of 3 years, we've been developing new laws, basically, that protect individuals from being cloned and having their likenesses cloned and copied for commercial use. While I might not be able to clone Tom Hanks, his voice, likeness, his mannerisms, behaviors, and everything else, increasingly I can just create an alternative version of him. And again, if I've got the right level of distribution network, I mean, what makes Tom Hanks a celebrity? People like what he does, and the Hollywood studios have put Tom Hanks in lots of different movies, which a lot of different people have watched. So again, we kind of come back to that distribution point. But when we have a look at our ability to create digital influencers, again, there's nothing actually saying I even need to be human. I could be a pink talking crocodile, etc. So this is sort of where imagination starts going off the hook. And then in terms of actual brand, that's the literal $1 million question. Now, on the one hand, it's in an increasingly crowded marketplace, it's very difficult to stand out. When you have a look at social media, a lot of the short form videos that you'll see is, how to get your content to go viral, how to be popular, et cetera, et cetera. The fact of the matter is, everyone is actually chasing internet-based fame. But what they're really chasing is the algorithm. And when you have a look at the society we live in an algorithmic society. If you have a look at TikTok, for example, the way that TikTok actually rates your content is it will take your video, it will push it to about 200 to 300 people. Then it will measure how much of that video did people watch, how many people liked it, how many people commented, what was the engagement. And then at that point, when you hit a particular score, it will say, right, now I'm going to push this to 1,000 people. And again, it will measure it again. And if the measurements are high, it will then push it to 10,000 people. So while we're all chasing internet fame, ultimately we are all increasingly slaves to the algorithm. And once we figure out how to master an algorithm, invariably they're changed. And that's the biggest problem. We live in an algorithmic society where your news, where your content is promoted to me, not because you did anything specific. It's because the algorithm thought that I would like your content. So when you have a look at this, the change now, it used to be the case with traditional Western social media networks. If I had 10 million followers, then Instagram, when I created a new video, Instagram would push that video to 5% of that 10 million follower base and then measure it, and then it would push it out more. When you have a look at the way that Chinese social media platforms like TikTok work, they are interest based. So I can have 10 million followers and they might all love cats. But if I produce a dog video, then you could very well find that TikTok doesn't push the dog video to anyone in my network or any of my followers. It pushes it to people who like dogs. So what we're doing is, from a social media perspective, we're moving from a world where the platforms would automatically push out your content for the people who follow you, to a world where the platform almost ignores the number of followers you have, tries to understand what kind of video that you created, and then tries to match that video to people it thinks likes dogs. Which, depending on the content that you've created and how easy it is for the AI to understand that content, it might only push it to five people. So, on the one hand, creating a digital online presence is increasingly difficult. It's a crowded market space. It will get more crowded because at some point, if we take the YouTube channels, for example, and now at 820,000 subs? You know, if you take my YouTube channel, for example, at what point does anyone else just push a button and create whatever kind of content they want? So increasingly, there is a train of thought that it's real in-person human communities and connections that actually matter the most. And that's, you know, like we're having here. We're having a much more authentic sort of dialogue, conversation, and everything else than anything that we would have actually put onto social media. So it's in the future, as everything becomes increasingly autonomous and automated and behind a screen, it's increasingly human connection, real human connection in the real world, and real human skills that actually count.
Hello. Hi, Matthew. Sorry, I really liked what you just said. No, that was a hand by mistake, but actually, look in the hand. Thank you so much. That was a great insight you just shared. I love the connection, the human connection part of things. And I'm so glad to hear that, because often that is so overlooked. And when we talk about AI and, you know, futurist views and all of that, it's all about the technology instead of what is that going to push in us as humans. So my focus is more on the craftsmanship side of things, but it kind of relates to what you just said, where technology will actually push a higher degree of craftsmanship. So yeah, no, I like that. Thank you.
No, you're welcome. Well, on that point, so one of the conversations I've had with lots of people over the years basically is what impact will AI, for example, have on human creativity? And we don't, on the one hand, we don't really know, because as AI starts creating its own content, as I just simply say, create an image of, someone running around a running track and it creates the image, what does that do for human creativity? Now, a recent Microsoft study found that people who lean into AI and use AI heavily, in this case, it was software developers, their critical thinking skills diminish by 30%. And bear in mind that everyone says that in the future, critical thinking is a vital soft skill. That's important. But when we actually have a look at the impact that AI and different tools and technologies have on human creativity, I do a lot of work with musicians. So my sister is one of the musical directors at the West End. And NVIDIA released an AI, a synthetic audio AI recently that created sounds that nobody has ever heard before. So in this particular case, this AI generated the sound of a saxophone barking. Okay? So now the kind of question becomes, from a human creativity perspective, what happens when we have access to new kinds of tools that can create new kinds of sounds, like a barking saxophone? Or in the art space, we now have human artists that are actually creating, should we say, almost impressionist-like art of the mind of AI. So when you ultimately have a look at, so while a lot of people are afraid of these different technologies, we also have to remember, look around you and look at what human ingenuity built. There is almost nothing on this planet that has been built by anyone other than humans. Human ingenuity is massively underestimated. Human creativity is massively underestimated. But generally, from a human creativity perspective, we went to school and we were really creative. You all have done art class and DT and everything else. Then we come out of school, we get a job, and most jobs suck out our human creativity, because as a CEO, I will just tell you to do something. You haven't got to think about what you're doing. Most tasks that we do as adults aren't really creative. They don't flex our creative muscles, etc., etc. So as we get older, we inevitably start losing a lot of the creativeness that we've actually got. So what happens if we dial that back up?
Yeah, absolutely. On that point, I read a research quite recently. It was a study, and they studied 5-year-olds. I think it was like 1,600 5-year-olds, and the level of creativity. They were measuring creativity, and I think it was like 90% when they were 5, but they measured it again when they were 10, and it was about 70%. They measured it again when they were like 25, and it was only like 30% or something like that. So it's so true that we are born with that power to create, right? But then as the years go by, with everything around us, we become less and less creative. So yeah, that's super interesting.
The thing is, when we're born, everything is new. We're inquisitive. It's not an accident that when you have a look at kids before the age of, say, 13, they're generalists. They're taught on a variety of different topics.
Yeah.
But as we get older, eventually we say, right, what do you want to specialize in? Okay? And ultimately we say, I want to specialize in this. And when we say, well, why do you want to specialize in this? It's because I want that job. So we start off as generalists and we end up as T-shaped individuals. But even if you're a crafter, when was the last time that you went and explored new mediums? New points of view, new perspectives. We, as adults, we generally don't explore. We don't look at new things. We don't investigate. As children, try and keep children away from doing everything and experimenting with everything. It's difficult. But this is sort of one of the potentially one of the biggest problems that we actually have as a society, is we have access to increasingly powerful, capable tools. Just like I asked you all earlier, what's your purpose? I mean, can anyone tell me basically that they have seriously thought about what their purpose is, what would get them up out of bed every morning? Or are we all going with the status quo? I get up, I do what I'm told at work or whatever it happens to be. I go back home, I eat, I go to bed. I repeat. How is that helping your creativity, your thinking, your critical thinking, whatever it happens to be? It's not.
I think there might be a few people who have thought about it in this group, but yeah, like that. I was interested to know like what your story is, how you ended up being now.
So my background is I'm a scientist. So I am a marine biologist and oceanographer by trade. So I started working for the United Nations, basically doing coral reef environmental biology and protecting reefs in Belize and all around the world. Found that actually was a really, really crappily paid job. That's it. And I did actually want to eat. Plus, basically, if you're a coral environmental specialist, there's not much work in the UK for that kind of thing. So I ended up falling into technology. I started doing cold calling, selling network gear, all that kind of stuff. Then got headhunted for EMC. I headed up EMC's global sales teams in the end. I was then headhunted by IBM. So at IBM, I headed up IBM's global national security and public safety business, PSNS business. So I was the guy basically who was working with the national security agencies. And when you have a look at the national security agencies, like the CIA, the NSA, GCHQ, the Five Eyes, etc., they don't really want to know what's here today. They want to understand what's coming in the next 10 to 20 years. So I developed the Blue Sky Forum for GCHQ, which is where we looked up to 20 years out to try to develop the latest cybersecurity technologies and stuff to, shall we say, tip things in the UK's favor. I started teaching futures studies at IBM Business School. When you think about the vast majority of organizations, I tend to think organizations are looking for three things. Yeah, so these are the big multinational companies. They want to reduce costs, they want to reduce risk, and they want to grow. But when it comes to helping organizations, for example, like Accenture or Nike or Adidas, etc., understand what the future looks like so that they can understand where the new markets are, most people are really bad at that. So long story short, I left IBM. I went to ATOS, basically where I headed up and created ATOS's multi-billion-dollar cloud business. So this is the company that runs the Olympics. So that was a fun session. But throughout my time with IBM and ATOS, I saw about 250,000 people being made redundant because both companies were being disrupted. So IBM got disrupted by cloud. ATOS got disrupted by generally its own incompetence. And ultimately, a company like IBM saw the future coming, didn't really, which was cloud computing, didn't really understand what that was, wanted to protect its own business, got disrupted, lost half of its market value overnight. It went from $120 billion valuation to $60 billion valuation, pretty much like that. Their response, as with most companies, when they're disrupted, their response basically was to lay off 50,000 people. So IBM kicked people out of the business that had been working for the company for about 20 to 30 years. And as part of that redundancy process, they gave them 3 months' wages and they gave them access to a CV writing service. Now, at that point, I thought, on the one hand, IBM should have done a better job of seeing the future, qualifying the future, and then trying to actually move into the future. But fourthly, when you think about the future from an individual perspective, if you as an individual really want to understand what the future could look like, where do you go? As an individual, you haven't got anywhere to go. As a CEO of a global company, you can pay a Silicon Valley company $15,000 for a retreat to understand what the future is, what it looks like, get a point of view, and figure out what to do about it. So I created the 311 Institute with the express purpose of trying to democratize access to the future so that everybody can see what's coming at them. And because if you can see what's coming at you, then you can get that point of view. You can find people to help you understand the impact of that new thing. And then you can create a plan to either own it or dominate it. And that's it, which is why, I mean, all this stuff, I mean, this is stupid. You know, I kind of joke that I'm not a best-selling author. I've got 13,000 pages of books, which have taken like 10 years to write. Everything is free. So I always joke, I'm not a best-selling author because I never sell my books. You know, when you have a look at the YouTube channel, the reason why I post so much content on the YouTube channel isn't because I've got loads of time on my hands. It's frankly because you can go and have a look at the 22 inflection points that are coming at us all. You can listen to my video. You get that point of view. You can think about it and then think, if this future does happen, how do I win? How do I benefit from it? As opposed to how does it run me over? So, long story short, I got fed up of seeing over 250,000 people being made redundant because companies like IBM, HP, Dell, and all these other guys basically were clueless when it came to seeing the future and then figuring out how to win from it.
Wow, yeah, that's really interesting. Thank you. So, yeah, I guess that answers what your purpose is as well. I guess you see your purpose as helping people to future-proof their lives, so they can see what's happening and put themselves in a winning position rather than a position where they're going to get run over and made redundant.
I'm going to put something in the chat. So, as an example of trying to help everybody, if any of you ever need to make a decision on anything, that's the Futurists version of how to make better, faster, smarter decisions.
Cool. Hello, it's Winston. Wanted to know about the work that you're doing with Paramount. You said that they are making like their own AI studio. I couldn't understand what you're doing specifically.
Yeah, so with Paramount, it's a mixture of advisory and so on and so forth. So it's showing them what's coming, showing them how quickly things are changing, and then helping them try to figure out what their future business strategy should be. That's it in a nutshell. Because in a world is increasingly filled with people who can create content cheaply, if you are an organization like Paramount who creates and distributes content, then that's a disruptive threat. So what is it? Why is it? And then how do you lean into it?
Awesome.
Kind of the same with Warner Brothers and Disney. You know, ultimately over time, and this starts coming through really in the next few years, but then accelerates really within the next 10. Yeah, if you're Disney and you're making $1 billion from the latest Marvel blockbuster, what happens when anyone can just recreate that movie, albeit in a slightly different genre or whatever it happens to be, and then distribute it? You know, what happens, for example, if Mr. Beast is the person who creates the franchise that kills Marvel because he's got the distribution? So I help companies see the future, figure it out, and then develop the strategies to ideally win. If I say lose, that's not really a good thing. That wouldn't get me any clients.
On that point, oh, sorry, you carry on.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just asking, if people have that skill set, would you recommend not working with big brands like Warner Brothers or Paramount, or would you say just bring that skill set to them?
So the synthetic content, sort of skill set.
Yes.
No, so I'd actually, on the one hand, I'd say take it to them, but actually, if you have that skill set, then what I'm seeing at the moment is I would suggest that you go to the smaller, sort of more boutique studios. So if you know Cannes Lions, about 2 years ago, there were only 2 companies that were using artificial intelligence to create, should we say, content for Cannes Lions. Last year, there were 12 that were nominated. Next year, we'll see be like 100 plus. So the organization, ultimately, the organizations that are starting to develop their own artificial intelligence studios, or units, are actually the smaller boutique studios. The big ones have, but they're using AI in a full-blown movie workflow. I'd go to the smaller boutiques at the moment, and there are quite a lot. There are quite a lot of them in London.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I could keep asking questions. I'll ask you one more question anyway. So like with this studio up the road, we live near like the film studios. So we've got Shepperton Film Studios and Pinewood Film Studios and all those studios, and they're all building loads and loads of big new buildings and huge developments. And what would you recommend for them? Do you think they're going to become housing or something? Because when I think about this, I think what is the point of all this? Surely they're not going to be using these for making film soon.
Oh, so great question. So ironically, while AI is getting better at creating different types of content, and while it's getting better at being used for very specific use cases within movie making, it isn't at the point yet where it can make a TV series by itself or a movie. So part of the reason we're seeing such a huge expansion, especially in the UK, basically of actual movie lots like Shepperton, Pinewood, as well as, there's Universal are building a multi-billion-dollar set of stages, basically up near Coventry, something like that, is not necessarily because of any technology development. It's actually from a commercial perspective. So we are still in the streaming wars. So Netflix, for example, is producing $15 billion worth of content every year, because the reason why you go to Netflix rather than Amazon Prime is because Netflix got a lot of new content that you like, etc., etc. So as various organizations like Disney, like Amazon, like Paramount, like HBO, like Netflix, etc., all try to dominate the streaming wars, one thing that they've found is that there simply aren't enough movie lots, there aren't enough people, there aren't enough actors and actresses, etc., etc. So the reason we're seeing such a large expansion of movie lots throughout the world, but especially in the UK, is for the simple reason that all of the big streaming giants are in a race to create as much content as possible so that they become the dominant streaming platforms in the future. In other words, they kill off their rivals. Then eventually, as AI reaches a tipping point where these studios can just go, AI, make me a movie, and it's good enough, then you'll see the industry collapse down. And then, yes, Shepperton will probably basically become a rather fancy housing estate with some boutique restaurants.
Also, one more thing that came to my mind when you were talking about, that actors are signing contracts for their likeness to be used. I maybe 6 months ago or so, I was they were looking for contestants for one of these big game shows. I can't remember what it's called, but it was one of those huge game shows based on a thing that did well on Netflix, similar to the Mr. Beast game.
Squid Games.
Squid Games, yeah. They were looking for contestants for Squid Games. Yeah. And I thought, I might put my name in the hat. But when I looked at the contract, it said that you give permission for them to use your likeness.
Yeah.
basically for like
Forever.
forever.
Yeah.
And I was like, no way, like I'm not gonna do that. So like I think that's something that we need to like watch out for, like I'm thinking maybe like even the social medias, they might even try and sneak this into some of the updated terms of use and stuff.
Yeah, they do. So there was when we talk about jobs of the future, here we go. One of the biggest privacy invasions that we've actually seen is there are, as you say, Barnabas, but there are a lot of organizations that say, okay, for whatever reason, you want us to use your likeness, or we'd like to use your likeness, your face, etc. But when you're signing the contracts, you give them unlimited use of your likeness in perpetuity. Okay. So a little while ago, here we go. I'll put this in the chat for everyone. This is called, I'll call this Reface, whatever this one is. So where's this? So in 2021, there was an organization called, here we go. Where is it? Here we go. Called Hour One. That's it. So in 2021, basically, there was a company called Hour One. And what they said is right, what we want to do is we want to use people's faces. And every time we use your face, Synthesia do it as well, we will pay you $1. Okay. Now, that sounds great. But when you're actually signing these contracts, these companies, you're giving these companies permission to use your face, your likeness, your voice, your biometrics in perpetuity for anything that they like, except maybe sexually explicit scenes. And so far, when we have a look at the law hasn't caught up with that stuff yet. But yeah, absolutely. As with the people from Hour One, what they were finding was that, 1 minute I'd be the face of a university training course. The next minute I'd be the face of a beauty brand. The next minute I'd be stuck on the face of a dog. I'd be stuck on a dog. And this kind of creates quite a lot of problems, because if you're signing away your face and your likeness and your voice to be used online, and you can't sue them, they can create anything. You could be on the next herpes advert.
Yeah, it's an issue.
$10 million basically blast everywhere. So this is sort of where all of this, again, when we have a look at what the technology can do and what it's enabling, and the new startups that we're seeing come through, as ever, the law and regulation are 8 years behind, roughly, at the minute. Despite the fact I was telling them 10 years ago, basically, to watch it.
Yeah, I think that's probably one of the areas as well, though, where I think that like when I'm thinking about it, I'm thinking, okay, these kind of game shows are the areas where maybe AI won't invade for a while, but when they're asking for you to have use of your likeness into the future forever to go into a game show, you're wondering, what are they going to be using my likeness for? Yeah. So I was like, I don't care, even if I won that game show, I'm not giving them use of my likeness.
That's but there are a lot of people who are signing away their likeness for like $100.
Yeah,
forever. And then so if some of the people basically that did sign the contracts became really, really famous, like a Tom Cruise kind of level of fame, then for $100, the makers of the Squid Games could use Tom Cruise's likeness forever on everything. And you can't get that back unless you do a buyout.
And there's a good chance that some of those people will become famous because of the TV show.
Yeah, or they'll become insta-famous or whatever it happens to be. But this is where genuinely, when you actually have a look at data collection, when you have a look at privacy laws, when you have a look at you are the product, we are Yeah, I mean, we're being put into the corporate blenders far too often. I mean, I'm just waiting for someone to deep fake me. I keep talking about that in my videos.
Yeah.
I keep telling people I've already deep faked myself. I said, which actually I have.
I didn't deep fake you yet.
Yeah. The first time I deep faked myself was actually for an event in South Africa for Visa.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, quite a long time ago. That's it. But yeah, they haven't bought my image rights. They didn't want them.
Well, yeah, thank you so much. I think that is it definitely now. I think we're down to just 4 or 5 of us now. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. I look forward to staying in touch and doing something in the future, hopefully.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Well, thank you, everybody. Great talking to you all and
Thank
with
you.
you all. And have a great future. Remember, you're limitless.
Huge thanks to Matthew Griffin for sharing those exclusive insights with our private AI community. If you're serious about staying ahead of the curve and want to get the latest insights on AI to create, build, or lead, the link to join is below. And if you got value from this conversation, make sure to hit subscribe so you don't miss out on upcoming exclusive insights coming soon. See you in the next one. And if you'd like to see any of the other videos on AI tools, they're here and here. By the way, this conversation happened within our private AI community, AI Creator Tools. There's a link in the pinned comment below this video and in the description. If you'd like to get access to exclusive industry guests like this, make sure to join so you can level up your AI game to create, learn, and grow with AI tools. Now let's get back to the interview.